This episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan is dedicated to the memory of Jim Harris, better known to the wrestling world as the Ugandan giant Kamala. It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now here he is, the man who made Taylor Swift do whatever she said she did, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer. And yes, we have reached a milestone episode 10 here in Diary of a Wrestling Fan. It feels like just yesterday I was doing episode 1. Where did the time go? Yeah, that was bad, I know. Anyway, welcome to this podcast, which chronicles my 33 amazing years of being a fan of professional wrestling. Thank you for listening. Easy for me to say. Thank you for listening on Spotify, Anchor. Follow, subscribe, do whatever you got to do on whatever podcast format you are listening on. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you're listening to this on YouTube. Subscribe. I want to thank everyone who tuned in last week to SummerSlam 1997 episodes. Great memories there, let me tell you. That really brought a lot of great things fun back, and it was just a lot of fun to do. Numbers for that one were better than I expected, so thank you all again for listening. And before we get any further, I want to give a quick shout out, of course, to Pro Wrestling Ontario. From bell to bell, match to match, beginning to end, show to show, Pro Wrestling Ontario has some of the most exciting competition in any given match that is before your very eyes. Give us a follow on Twitter or Instagram. Give us a like on Facebook and subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, in the corner of the video, there is a link to Pro Wrestling Ontario. Go there, hit that subscribe button after you listen to the podcast and watch our amazing content, the backstage shenanigans of Foundation, promos, video packages, matches, complete shows. Both Iron Cup tournaments are available to watch in their entirety. That's Pro Wrestling Ontario. All right, if you haven't gotten it by now with the introduction, I am covering Daniel Bryan's rise to the top. We're going to go all the way from SummerSlam 2013 to WrestleMania 30 with some synopsises about what happened to him before and what happened after. So to know Daniel Bryan, a lot of you diehard fans of him out there obviously know Bryan Danielson. Bryan Danielson has been referred to by the anti-smart movement as a quote-unquote vanilla midget. Now, for those who don't know what the anti-smarks are, the anti-smarks are the guys who and girls who think the opposite of what the smart marks apparently think. And that they think that makes them better when really they're just as obnoxious and annoying. They hate guys like Daniel Bryan. They hate guys like CM Punk. They go out of their way to sing their praises for Roman Reigns, just to annoy people. It's ridiculous that these guys are indie-rific, even though a lot of the guys they support came from the indies too. It's really stupid. But the point is, Daniel Bryan, Bryan Danielson, was referred to as a guy that shouldn't be a main eventer by some of these fans. Shouldn't be a guy, he doesn't put butts in seats, he doesn't draw a dime. To people who know nothing, know nothing, know-it-alls is what I call some of these people, and what they don't know can fill the Grand Canyon. Now, here's the thing. The WWE, in the last several years, and again, this is not to say they're bad, not to say that they're terrible, not to say they don't have talent. Don't misinterpret me. But it's been hard finding a story to truly get invested in as a fan, truly get invested in the last 5-6 years. Now, is it because maybe I've become so old and jaded that nothing can get to me? And I thought that for a second. I'm thinking, no, and here's why. Because other companies, whether it be indie companies, AEW, New Japan, or whatever, or Impact even, like, I've found myself right into the stories that they were telling. I found myself into the feuds, the rivalries, the matches. And again, WWE, there's still a lot of matches I'm into. And again, it's not to say everything they've done is bad over this past few years. No, it's just, it doesn't get me as enthralled as it used to. But yet, there is still wrestling out there that does. Now, that's being said, I'm not going to begrudge anyone who loves the WWE these days. If that's what you like, that's what you like. And that's one thing I can't stand either about the smart mark, anti-smart mark war is that you're faulted for liking one company's above another, the other company sucks, blah, 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 blah. To me, you just like what you like, and you don't like what you don't like. You don't like AEW, you like WWE? Great. You like AEW, you don't like WWE? Great. You like both? Great. You don't like either? You like Impact? Great. As long as you're enjoying something wrestling related, who really cares? What I'm getting at here, and I know it's taking me a long time to get to the point, the last thing I truly felt emotionally invested in as a fan that WWE has done was Daniel Bryan's journey to the top. It told such a fantastic underdog story of someone who was told, both in story and behind the scenes, you're not a guy, you're not a main event guy. Bryan Danielson, for those who don't know, was part of Shawn Michaels' wrestling school, also received a lot of training from William Regal, got good really fast, became a big star on the independent circuit, especially Ring of Honor, and after a decade of wrestling on the independent circuit, made it to WWE. And again, Danielson was a guy called by the anti-smarts who didn't like him a vanilla midget because again they thought because Kevin Nash made that term was so cool. Let's not forget, and Nash is entitled to his opinions, whatever. He's been around long enough, but like those guys that Nash called vanilla midgets, they still had success in the world of professional wrestling. They still made their mark on the industry. So really, I'm not going to say the joke's on him because that's how he felt it. Maybe Nash just felt they weren't on his level of drawing power or main event presence, and in some aspects he could have a point. But I like those guys. To me, it's all the fan things. And if you don't like someone like Daniel Bryan or CM Punk, or even you look today, someone like Kevin Owens or whatever, that's your choice. That is your choice of who you like as a fan. It was around this time people were starting to use terms like overrated, underrated, relevant, irrelevant, some of those overused, annoying terms. But yet, there were still people out there trying to say, oh, Daniel Bryan doesn't draw the majority of fans. He doesn't draw that casual fan base in. And again, I really don't have, look at the TV ratings, they don't lie. Funny, I remember doing a lot of research on that, and back in the day, Daniel Bryan's segments actually did really well. So I'm failing to see the problem here. And every fan, maybe that's exaggerating, but I say about more than 90% were chanting yes in those audiences. Now, jumping ahead a little bit here, this isn't to say that Daniel Bryan's rise to the top wasn't easy. Now, his time in WWE, I wouldn't even say it was tumultuous. He was always a presence on television. He was always heavily featured, even when he made his debut on the main roster as a member of season 1 of the original concept of NXT. Now, for those who don't remember the original concept of NXT, it replaced ECW on Sci-Fi back in early 2010. It was 8 rookies, quote unquote, that had 8 pros to mentor them. Looking back in hindsight, the concept of NXT, in theory, wasn't bad, and it had its moments. But it seems to me, now that I look back, it seemed to be a show that amused the people in WWE themselves, and it seemed to be a show to troll, quote unquote, the internet fans. Hence Michael Cole's heel turn. Again, hence when they put Miz with Daniel Bryan, I knew exactly what they were doing when they did that. I mean, I can't read their minds, obviously, but come on. They've even alluded to that more than once about The Miz being Daniel Bryan's pro. And and here's the thing though, and I'll say a positive on this: the story between Bryan and The Miz during this NXT run was interesting. It was entertaining. It actually, to me, was the highlight of the first season. And another great thing that came out of NXT was Nexus, which I'll get to. So Daniel Bryan had a little mini feud with Michael Cole. Yes, you heard that right. And even that had its entertaining moments too. But Cole just became so overbearing with it. And it's just really annoying. But either way, Bryan was getting heavily spotlighted on that show, despite he didn't win a single match on it. But he had a really good match with Chris Jericho, I recall, on the debut episode. Even on Raw, he had a good match with Batista, where Batista actually gave a lot back to him when he wasn't supposed to. Batista actually gave Daniel Bryan quite a bit in that match, and apparently it was supposed to be just an easy squash. But no, he chose to help make the guy. So Nexus formed, then they made their debut on Raw, including Daniel Bryan, where they just pretty much destroyed the whole set, attacked everyone, including ringside crew and Justin Roberts. And Daniel Bryan choked out Justin Roberts with his tie, which was a no-no. He got fired briefly until it blew over, kind of. He worked some indie dates again and returned to WWE as the mystery opponent against the Nexus, the mystery partner, I should say, against Nexus at SummerSlam, which was a nice, really good surprise. From there, he won the U.S. title. He's won Money in the Bank. And then he cashed in Money in the Bank, became champion, lost to Sheamus in 18 seconds. I'm just giving a Cole's House version here. But Daniel Bryan, the way, I was saying the whole yes thing. Because the way he would enter the ring, making his entrance, he would jump up and down, raising his arms in the air with his finger pointed up, and he would shout yes. And the crowd started doing that with him. So there was a hook there. Sometimes it takes just any little thing to get a hook on a character, a crowd to get into a character. And despite the fact that he had this quote-unquote vanilla midget stigma among certain fans, he had a personality. He was pretty good on the mic, I felt. I didn't think his promos were bad whatsoever. I think, again, they concentrated on his look. He was small. He was plain looking, some people would say. But man, was he a hell of a wrestler. He still is. Hell of a wrestler. To me, his storytelling abilities in the ring reminded me so much of my all-time favorite wrestler, Bret the Hitman Hart, in many ways. And he could wrestle as a heel. He could wrestle as a face. He did the whole thing with AJ Lee. And then he turned heel, started treating her terribly. Had a feud with CM Punk. Again, these guys feuding in armories. Now we're feuding on the biggest stage of them all, WWE. And it was some really good stuff. To me, it helped fans get attached to him. Well, I guess they're still doing the yes thing. Even though when he went heel, he tried the no. Formed a hilarious tag team with Kane, which got over huge. Team Hell No, of course. And then before we knew it, he was a face again because people loved this guy. They loved his underdog persona. And people, again, when he was getting really popular, tried to dismiss it. Oh, he's over because it's his catchphrase that's over. It's his word that's over. Yeah, because that's such a bad thing, eh? Austin 316, anybody? Yeah, Austin 316 wasn't a catchphrase. It was honestly just a phrase Austin used once. But the point is, it drew people in. Yes, and even no, drew people in with Daniel Bryan. But the fans I've talked to, Fans who wear those yes shirts over the years, I asked them, why? Why do you like Daniel Bryan so much? I already knew why I liked him, but why do you guys like him so much? Their answer? Oh, I like to root for the underdog. There you go. Another answer? Oh, he's a hell of a wrestler. I asked more than a dozen people this question. Not one of them said, I like him because he goes yes. But again, it made people take notice of him, and they got invested in what his character is really about. By 2013, they couldn't ignore it anymore. Now, okay, I get it. Vince McMahon, like every other wrestling promoter in the world, has his idea of what a main event guy should be. In his eyes, it probably wasn't Daniel Bryan. And again, I'm not saying this to speculate. Even the likes of Bruce Pritchard has said these things. Bruce has worked, say what you want about Bruce, and a lot of people do, but Bruce has worked alongside Vince for many, many years. He would know. But at the same time, there have been many occasions where Vince McMahon, despite the fact that some of these guys weren't his idea of what a main eventer should be, would still make them main eventers. Bruce Pritchard infamously tells a story about when Vince met Eddie Guerrero for the first time. He's so tiny. But Eddie won him over. And obviously, Daniel Bryan at least had to win Vince over to a point to give him a main event against John Cena at SummerSlam 2013. And this is where our story begins. Now, the build-up for this was actually very unique. John Cena had, it was an angle where he was allowed to choose his challenger for the title at SummerSlam. And when he was cutting the promo, teasing who was going to choose, the fans were still chanting yes, yes, yes. And to no surprise, even though Cena was good at trying to build up the suspense, he chose Daniel Bryan. These are two of the top baby faces at the time, along with CM Punk. CM Punk was feuding with Brock Lesnar. Punk and Bryan had come up in the indie scene together, pretty much. They were both big stars in Ring of Honor, as I mentioned, and they had known each other quite well. And they had defied the odds, defied the politics, and then made it to the top. Say what you want about them, they were never the guy, they were never that guy, they were never the guy. Well, whatever. They still became main event talents. They still headlined major pay-per-views. So, Daniel Bryan and John Cena, the main event of SummerSlam 2013. Now, SummerSlam 2013, in my opinion, was actually a really good show. A very enjoyable show. And the Daniel Bryan-John Cena match was fantastic. Triple H had inserted himself as the guest referee. But here's the thing, that the way they beautifully built this up. Now, people say how Triple H has that overbearing presence that he did in the CM Punk, the Summer of Punk thing. In just many ways, people criticize Triple H's overbearing presence. And to be fair, in my own opinion, he did have that at times. But in this feud, he was in such the background that it really didn't take away from anything. I thought it was very smart because it made what happened later all the more surprising. It was good storytelling. So, Daniel Bryan wins clean in the middle of the ring against the biggest star in the company of the last, at that point, close to a decade, at least 8 years. Clean wins over John Cena alone are hard to come by. Clean wins over John Cena on one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year. That's something. To me, it's that whole, the cliche, he was made. He was a made guy that night. Even though he was already a star in the eyes of the fans, he was tried and true main event guy. Then, of course, Randy Orton comes out. He was a Money in the Bank briefcase holder at the time. Teases a cash in, decides against it. Ryan enters the ramp. Triple H pedigrees him, and I'm like, oh, right away, they're in cahoots. Triple H and Randy Orton are in cahoots because they have a history together. So, Orton cashes in. He wins the title. Ryan's moment is taken away. To me, I thought this was great. I thought, wow, this is going to be a great feud. Orton and Bryan. Now, here's the thing. What made the impending feud so interesting was that they blur the lines of fiction and reality about Daniel Bryan facing politics of not being a main event guy and putting it on screen. Many felt that the promos that Stephanie McMahon and Triple H were cutting were how they really felt. The whole Vince McMahon thing, it's not personal, it's just business. And of course, it became the buzzword, and the anti-smarks ate this up. That's the thing. They suckered the anti-smarks in with this, too. They suckered all sides in with this. You're a B-plus player. And they were using that on like the Facebook groups and everything for months. Oh, well, he is a B-plus player. Hook, line, and sinker. They got them. So during the start of this whole angle, Daniel Bryan was being laid out every week on Raw, pretty much, by Orton mostly. And I went to the Raw in Toronto with my girlfriend at the time, bought the Daniel Bryan Respect the Beard t-shirt. And the fans in the crowd, when Bryan was about to be laid out again at the end of that episode of Raw, the go-home show to the Night of Champions pay-per-view. Go-home Raw, I should say. And Bryan sprung up and laid out Orton. His fans were starting to groan, oh, he's going to get laid out again, he's going to get laid out again. Nope, boom. And his support just kept growing. And me, I was into it every week. There were times in this period where I was tuning into Raw at a habit, just paying attention to what I felt was the good stuff. But man, this was canvas TV for me, and I'm sure others felt the same way. Night of Champions, again, told a great story, a really good match between Orton and Daniel Bryan. Bryan won the match, but it was a fast count. So obviously, and I noticed that right away. I'm trying to be happy he's champion, but wait, something's up here. Something's up. And lo and behold, the next night, Bryan was stripped of the title. Scott Armstrong clearly on the take. So again, more great TV. Again, Bryan's resentment to Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, saying they love him, but he's a B-plus player, and then saying he's not good for business. And again, the fans ate it up. They had a match for the vacant title at Battleground. Daniel Bryan and Randy Orton again went to a no contest. Now again, this is where the anti-smarks rear their ugly heads. Both Night of Champions and Battleground didn't draw the strongest pay-per-view buys. Night of Champions was down significantly from the year before. Battleground drew one of the lowest pay-per-view buys at that point of all time. Now, it's easy to say that people just did not want to pay to see Daniel Bryan compete for the title. I can't read every wrestling fan's mind. The Battleground pay-per-view was a mere 3 weeks before the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. That's another factor. Hell in a Cell traditionally did pretty well every year. Probably that's what they were saving their money for. Who knows? Again, I can't read their mind. But Hell in a Cell still drew a good number. It was actually up from the previous year. And again, the vacant title, and this is where Shawn Michaels got involved. Again, they're engaging so many different scenarios here, and they're making this thing last as long as they can. They're drawing out this feud. And to me, involving Shawn Michaels is brilliant because whose side is he on, if any? Daniel Bryan was the guy he helped break in. Triple H is his best friend. Shawn, of course, got involved because of Hunter sticking up for his best friend. Bryan loses. Orton's the champ again after the title was vacant for well over a month. So again, yes, these pay-per-views all being close together. And that's another thing too. I know for a fact, though, and this is another thing I know for a fact, people got burnt out paying for these pay-per-views so close together all the time. And they would save their money for the more important ones that they felt were more important. So after that, a great segment on Raw took place where Bryan put Shawn, his mentor, in the yes lock, and the fans loved it. And then in an instant, pretty much the snap of a finger, both Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, who at that point was unhappy, as we now know, with his current WWE status, after a feud with Ryback, Curtis Axel, and now the Wyatt family. The Wyatt family, again, Bray Wyatt, who's now known as The Fiend, they were a great faction. They were unique. They were different. They weren't the norm, I guess you could say, and that's, I think, what made people take notice of them. It's around this time, it seems, that the Daniel Bryan main event experiment was over. It's seen that way. Some have said that WWE never wanted to make him a main event guy. There was never any plan to get him to WrestleMania, and even Bryan has alluded to this on a couple of occasions, and even mentions it a bit in this book. But yet, could Bryan still be working everyone? That's the thing. Even in like wrestlers write books, you never know if they're still working something. You know what I mean? Like that's just it. You're still working the idea that they didn't want him to be the top guy. I don't know. Then they did that whole thing where Daniel Bryan joined the Wyatt family. And I'm thinking, I don't know. But my whole thought was, well, again, I still was invested in his character because let's wait till we see what happens next week. When he joined the Wyatt family, that didn't last at all. And he went back to chasing the title and then feuding with Bray still. They had an amazing match. Here's the thing now. This brings us to a historic night. That's Royal Rumble 2014. Now, again, people are thinking in reality, whether it's true or not, I don't think we'll ever fully know. Daniel Bryan was nowhere near the title picture. It was between Randy Orton and John Cena at the point they were unifying the titles. That was the big match, the Rumble. Again, a lot of fans hated it. And like I said, the feud between the smart marks and the anti-smart marks were at a fever pitch. Orton is, that's what the casual fans want to see. No, they want to see Daniel Bryan. He's better than all of them. They can't wrestle. Stuff. I actually had to leave a few Facebook groups because it was just getting so ridiculous. Orton and Cena, for the record, have earned the spots they have. There's not a doubt in my mind that they deserve the legacies that they have in terms of their success. Did I enjoy everything they did, be it with each other or elsewhere? No, not everything. Here's a news flash. Wrestling's not perfect. We're not going to enjoy everything. I've learned that the hard way. That isn't to say that Daniel Bryan or John Cena do not deserve the spots that they are in. Would I, as a fan, have preferred to see Daniel Bryan competing against them? Well, to quote the man himself, yes! But I still had that feeling in the back of my head, It's gonna happen at WrestleMania. From the moment Triple H kicked Daniel Bryan in the gut, hit that pedigree, I'm thinking they're gonna draw this out. They can make this go to WrestleMania. And I was looking forward to it. Was there a doubt in my mind that maybe they've given up on him? That maybe that the Daniel Bryan thing was just to get them through the fall? It crossed my mind. But he was still being heavily featured on television. That's why I didn't completely lose faith. So, the Yes Movement, as it's now become known as, had taken center stage. Despite the fact that he wasn't feeding for the title anymore, his popularity was growing. The Yes chants were getting louder. The 2014 Royal Rumble, also known for the night where CM Punk wrestled for the last time to date. Daniel Bryan wrestled Bray Wyatt that night. Bray won the match. And to be fair, they were heavily protective of Bray's character. He very rarely lost at this point. He still doesn't lose that often. He's been a character they've tried to protect more than most. But he won, and it was I think Bray's best match as that character. So people were still hopeful Daniel Bryan would appear in the Rumble, which again, not out of the realm of possibility. Because why? How many times have we seen wrestlers pull double duty to have a match earlier in the night and then be in the Rumble later? It's happened so like dozens, literally dozens and dozens, maybe even close to 100 times. Okay, I could be exaggerating there. But my point is that it almost happens every year. So that night, Batista was the guy everything was focused around. And this is where the whole thing comes in. Was Bryan the plan for WrestleMania, or did they really want to go with Batista? According to some, including Batista himself, I believe, he was supposed to be the guy. But again, you never know when they're working you these days. You really don't sometimes. That is one thing. People think that I often think sometimes everything's a work. Again, maybe Batista could be working that to keep that underdog aura around Bryan. I don't know. And that's the beauty of it, though. Part of me a large part of me doesn't want to know. To me, it makes the story all the more better. So Batista was brought in as a babyface because people obviously felt that, he was going to be cheered. He wasn't. Again, they saw him as taking Bryan's spot away from him. Batista was the clear favorite going into the Rumble, and the fans hated him for it. And in a weird irony that would become an irony later, in that Rumble, Roman Reigns had a great performance, and the fans were cheering Roman. Yes, Roman was still a heel at this point, but when they got to number 30, and I was watching this show at a bar here in Hamilton called Club Absinthe. It's a pretty spacious bar where they showed it on a big screen, and all of us just wrestling fans socialized, marked out, just did our thing. When number 30 hit, everyone at that bar was hoping it was Daniel Bryan. Or at least everyone I could see. When it wasn't, you could hear the collective groan on everyone. And you could even hear it on TV. They booed poor Rey Mysterio, who very rarely has ever been booed in his career. I know some people turned against him during his title reign back in 2006, but still, Rey had not been booed that often in WWE. Poor guy. He didn't deserve that. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And honestly, people just stopped being interested in the show. And again, so much so that they were cheering for Roman to eliminate Batista because they resented it so much. And that's when Batista came up with his catchphrase during this run, "Deal with it." Which I actually thought was pretty cool. Why? Because it gave us heel Batista again. because I loved heel Batista. Heel Batista was so entertaining in 2010. So entertaining. Duct tape, really? Never forget that promo. But yes, I keep, and again, and I'm not saying yes is a pun here all the time, people, but either way, it made people rally behind. And all it did, whether WWE planned it or not, it still made people rally behind Daniel Bryan more. It made people believe in him and get behind him as that underdog even more. He was still being called the B-plus player by Triple H. It was getting personal between he and Triple H. Personal still between he and Orton. Daniel Bryan's quest for the title resumed pretty much at this point. The Elimination Chamber, a show that was historic for being known as the last exclusive pay-per-view before the WWE Network launched shortly after this. And fans were again behind Daniel Bryan. Now, this was, I don't want to say a tumultuous time for the company because there was that factor of CM Punk leaving. Again, they had lost. And again, whether you want to agree with it or not, it's fine. But whether you like CM Punk or not, he was one of their biggest stars when he left. And losing a big star will have an effect. But much like any other time they've lost a big star, all the way up to Hulk Hogan, they move on. Once again, Daniel Bryan competed in the Elimination Chamber to go for the title. Orton was still the champion. Once again, Bryan got screwed. Some fans were getting impatient. I wasn't. I'm like, it's got to happen at WrestleMania. But my question after that Elimination Chamber pay-per-view was, what are they going to do to make it even that much more interesting? Because I had a feeling they were going to do something to make it that much more interesting. Right now, Daniel Bryan has issues with Triple H. He has issues with Stephanie McMahon. He has issues with Orton, obviously. He even has issues with Batista. And the Evolution reunion, pretty much on the horizon. Now, granted, it didn't really take shape until the Shield, the feud with the Shield, who was like going face at this point. But at the same time, though, it was there. It was there. The allegiances were there. It pretty much felt like a reunion before it actually happened. They finally made Batista into a heel, and it was everything that I hoped it would be. They gave him a story almost not the same, obviously, but in a small, subtle way, a nod to Bret Hart's performance at WrestleMania 10. 2 matches in one night to become the guy. So in the opening match, one of the best opening matches in WrestleMania history, yes, I will say that, WrestleMania 30 came. The Yes Movement, who can forget the Yes Rally on Raw? Now, that's another thing I want to talk about before I get to WrestleMania. I'm jumping the gun here, so I'm just so excited to get to this point. That Yes Rally was amazing. It truly showed why Daniel Bryan could be the guy. He got his match with Triple H, and if you were to win that, he'd be in the main event against Batista, who earned it with the Rumble win, and the champion Randy Orton. Daniel Bryan has a chance to settle all his scores and become the man in one night. They got the WrestleMania. The opening match Triple H, one of the best in WrestleMania history. Bryan wins. Triple H, to his credit, put him over strong. Great match. The main event. The moment. Now, some say that this was taken away, WrestleMania 30 was taken away because the Undertaker's streak ending. Yes and no. I believe that's what people were talking about, but I think they were talking about it a lot. Like, I think it overtook the buzz a little bit. I don't think it took away, but here's what I mean. People might have been talking about that a bit more due to the shock factor, but the glorious moment of Bryan's title reign still had its impact. It had the impact it should have. There was even conspiracy theorists out there who said that, oh, Vince did that to take away from Bryan's moment. Come on, guys. I've heard some pretty ridiculous stories about Vince before, but that one takes the cake. There's even been some I'm willing to partially believe, but that one, not even close. That is bullshit. But the match came. The fans were still into it. So despite the shock of the Undertaker's streak ending, they were still behind Daniel Bryan wholeheartedly. Because I believe the final visual that even Vince wanted for WrestleMania was a stadium full of people chanting yes. Again, fantastic match. You can forget that table spot. Check it out. Check it out if you can. Batista and Orton put over Bryan huge. Batista tapping out to the yes lock, the crowd erupting. It was a great moment. It was one of those moments, I will say right now, made me proud to be a wrestling fan. Because the guy who was told he couldn't do it, did it. Oh, Bill, that's the same old story. It's so cliche. Why does wrestling always have to be complicated to some people? Why can't a story of a babyface fighting an uphill climb be interesting to some people anymore? I always say to each their own, but there are some people who think wrestling needs to be complicated. I don't get it. I guess that's just me. But the glory of that moment was truly something to behold. This guy who 13, 14 years earlier, hell, even 5, 6 years earlier, was a big star in the independent circuit, won the championship, the main event of a WrestleMania, beating 2 bona fide stars. No, 3 if you count Triple H. Yeah, there you go. It was amazing. Despite the fact that the joy was short-lived, however, he still had that WrestleMania moment that so many dream of and so few achieve. Sadly, Daniel Bryan incurred personal tragedy with the death of his father. A young fan by the name of Connor, who Daniel Bryan had developed a close friendship with, who was a cancer patient, who was a diehard fan of his, also passed away not long after this. Bryan then entered a feud at this point with Kane, his former tag team partner, which, to me, and again, nothing against Glenn Jacobs or Kane, I felt as a fan the Kane character had kind of, already done it all it could do. But that's just me, again. Really, I felt that he could have done some variation of another stipulation match with, say, Orton, or have I actually would have thought they would have Triple H compete for the title. The match between Daniel Bryan and Triple H was not for the title. Daniel Bryan had to beat Triple H to make it to the main event. Like, it was as good as, but I would have thought they would have done a title match at the next pay-per-view. I was fully expecting that, to be honest. But the Evolution had the reunion and they feuded with the Shield, which was good stuff. They put over the Shield strong, so it was good stuff. Like it was still something good that they did after. But the feud with Kane just seemed like going from the high of WrestleMania to a feud with Kane. It just seemed like I don't want to say step down, but just it seemed like the aura of that chase to the title had kind of worn off already. And no, the fans were not getting sick of Bryan; they were still behind him solidly. But I've got in my head, what would have happened if he didn't get hurt? Then Bryan's injury problems with his neck, especially at the point started. Historically, problems with his neck and shoulder would plague him for the next year. He missed nearly a year of action. He returned, and fans were still behind him in 2015. But Vince's guy was Roman Reigns. And no, I don't hate Roman. I think Roman's a really good talent. I think Roman's timing is magnificent. I also think Roman became a scapegoat for a frustrated fan base. But I'm guessing here. Again, I can't read Vince McMahon's mind. The best we can do is guess sometimes. It seems to me he was so hell-bent on Roman and felt that Daniel Bryan had his time, but yet was still going to be a significant player, that he could go with this other guy. And I guess some people say WWE trolls the fans. I think in some regards that might be true, but they say that I think it was the Fastlane pay-per-view, because Daniel Bryan, when the Rumble, he got eliminated, the fans hated that. Hated that. Roman won. They hated that. I'm talking about the fans in attendance. I'm not speaking for every single wrestling fan. They hated it. Bryan lost to him, to his credit, put Roman over strong at Fastlane. Fans in attendance that night, the majority of them seem to hate that. And at WrestleMania, Daniel Bryan competed for the Intercontinental title. It was a ladder match that featured he and a bunch of others. I think Barrett, Ambrose, R-Truth, Ziggler, Stardust, and I want to say Luke Harper. I think so. If I'm going off by heart here, and he won. My whole thought behind that was good, because if he's not going to be the champion, as Intercontinental Champion, he's going to have freaking great matches every week on like Raw with likes of Dolph Ziggler or whoever else they put him in there with. Fine by me. Fine by me. And then, of course, he was forced into retirement. Not long, once again, seemed like it was repeating the same patterns after his WrestleMania performance, which was really good. He was pulled off the road. I believe the term was precautionary measure. At the time, his injuries weren't revealed. Obviously, people speculated it was about his neck again. Then I believe it became more about concussions, more than his neck at this point. And he announced his retirement in 2016. I'd always held out the hope that he would come back. I felt so bad for him. I felt so bad for a guy I never met. Why? Because his underdog story had a hint of reality to it. And he fought all the odds to be number one. Suddenly it was all taken away from him. Though, at that point, you couldn't help but feel sorry for the guy. There were rumors that he was requesting his release to go to work for New Japan or any other company. I heard he wanted to work in Mexico. He was SmackDown GM for a while. He still appeared on television. He's still a prominent part of the company. People still want to see him. People still want to see him back in the ring. And I was happy to see he made a comeback a couple years ago. I was delighted to see him in the ring. He was still loved. And his comeback was well received. But sadly, it just seemed to me the aura that he had developed was lessened a bit. And again, it's not his fault. He was hurt. He was out of action for a couple of years, actually 3 years almost. Even though he was still around, people still loved him. Obviously, a lot changes in 3 years. The fans change. They just didn't have that same investment in him. It seemed he was, and the yes chants were still there. Obviously, again, he was going to be a prominent part of the company, and he was still used as a main event guy. Then and I did not see this one coming. They turned him heel when he became champion again, beating AJ Styles. To me, it showed a whole new side of him again. The whole vegan environmental character was great. Some of the best stuff that he has done in the last couple of years. He had a great match with Brock Lesnar shortly after this turn at Survivor Series, which I was expecting to be a squash. It wasn't as anything but, and it was still told a magnificent story. He's still a great storyteller. That's what I mean. He's, despite the injuries, despite being out of action for 3 years, despite everything, he's still a great wrestler to this day. And it's why he's still one of my favorites. Because at the end of the day, whether WWE wanted him to or not, or whether it was all part of the story, doesn't matter. The point is, he still defied the odds. He still made it. He's still there. And good for him. Wow. This is an interesting journey. I almost sound like I was getting heated there in a couple ways. And as I say, if this thing has taught me anything, the way wrestling fans, have changed, and they do. Like anything else in the world, things change. To me, I always say, overrated is a term people use because they just simply don't enjoy a wrestler. To me, that's ridiculous. Relevant. Ugh. You don't like Daniel Bryan, you don't like any given wrestler, that's up to you. But to say he doesn't deserve the success he's had, that's just ignorant. I'm not necessarily a member of the C Nation, but John Cena deserves every single accolade that has come his way, and I don't mind saying that. The man is truly among one of the greats. So to Daniel Bryan, do I put him up there as a Hall of Famer? You all know what I'm going to say next. Yes. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan. Thank you for listening on Anchor, Spotify, wherever podcasts are streamed, or if you're listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Anywhere else, just follow, subscribe there, whatever you do on these podcast platforms to just keep up with Diary of a Wrestling Fan. Next week, we are going to talk about a feud that is still in a match that is still talked about to this day, about the rivalry that captured fans in summer 2005, Eugene and Kurt Angle. Now, Hulk Hogan and Shawn Michaels. What a feud this was for many different reasons. And I'm going to talk about it in detail next week. I cannot wait. Thank you all for tuning in the journey of Daniel Bryan this week here on Diary of a Wrestling Fan. Follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as BillChase33. Facebook simply as Bill Chase. Add me. I like to talk wrestling. Otherwise, until next week, I quote a wise Hamiltonian. When I'm telling you, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, just don't tell any stories at his wedding if he ever gets married.